You're tuned to the West of Scotland area group of Merg. I'm Chic Thomson, and please relax and enjoy this presentation. We're going to talk about the task manager, and it's an interesting thing to start talking about the task manager, to talk about how you start the task manager. If you take the taskbar at the bottom of the screen and right click it, and a part that's not used, one of the options there is the task manager. If you do Control-Alt-Delete, one of the options, task manager, Control-Shift-Escape, over at the left-hand side of your keyboard will start the task manager. Run task MGR, search for the word task, right-click the Windows button in Windows 8, give you the task manager. There's also about 6 other techniques for starting the task manager, from PowerShell, from batch shells, from inside a program. There's a dozen ways of starting this program. You don't need a mouse, you don't need a keyboard, you need one or the other to start it, but you can always get to the task manager. And the reason that you need lots and lots of ways to get to the task manager is that task manager is really important. It's one of the major parts of Windows. If you've got a program that's misbehaving, it'll let you kill that. It'll let you monitor what your machine's doing, what the operating system's doing, what the programs are doing. It lets you look at how much memory, processor, disk, network, what disks you've got attached. If you've machines got bloatware or cruft, that stuff that came in the laptop and you can't get shot of it, Task Manager will let you spot that and get shot of it. If you've got viruses, malware, anything dodgy in your machine, it'll let you get rid of that as well. If you've got somebody in your machine that's not you, you will spot it in Task Manager. Now that could be somebody with a black hat speaking in the back door and all that, but it's much more likely to be a printer that you've shared, that's letting other people use your printer, that's letting other people use one of your network shares, and your processor is using its time for their purposes. Lets you spot that and lets you deal with it. It'll also let you make your machine run more streamlined, make it less clunky. It particularly lets you streamline the starting up of your PC. It lets you get rid of latency, unresponsiveness, slowness, chugginess in PCs. And if you're wanting to take it to extremes, you can match the PC's setup to what you're doing. So if I'm doing video monitoring, I can get rid of all that programming cruft. If I'm actually writing programs, I can get rid of all the video editing cruft because I don't need it. I can make the machine be designed for what I do. I do a lot of fixing PCs for people. And one of the things that I hear regularly and oft, a dozen times a year, is when I bought this, it was really quick, it was really fast, it was really responsive, and it was okay for 6 months. And then in the past 6 months, it's got slower and slower and chuggier, and there's something wrong with it. Can you fix it? And when I'm doing that, I don't replace hard disks. I don't replace memory. What I generally do is go into the task manager and fix it there. Nearly everything you need to do to get your machine behaving itself properly, you can do inside the task manager. The basic task manager, if you go to any one of those opening techniques, will take you to the task manager. And that's what it looks like. If you click your mouse on any one of those buttons, nothing will happen. It just shows you what programs you've got open at the minute. In fact, there's the task manager for this PC at the minute. It's only currently running the PowerPoint because I've got everything else shut down. But if you right mouse the task manager, whoa, that happens. It lets you switch to one of these tasks. It lets you kill one of these tasks. For some reason, it lets you write back to Microsoft about the task. I've got no idea why you would want to do that. If you've got a debugger fitted, you can debug the task. You can create a memory dump of the task if you want to really go in and find out what's wrong with it. You can start a task that you don't have any other way of starting. If you've lost, have you ever had a program disappear for your menu and you can't start it, you can't find it? With this, you can just go to Run New Task, When you type that, you click on that, up comes a command, you put in calc.exe and the calculator starts, notepad.exe and notepad starts. So you can use that. The always on top, for my mind, has got nothing to do. There's a golden rule in Windows that you select something and then you decide what you're doing with it. That breaks the rule because that always on top is for Task Manager in general. If I go here and right mouse that, you'll see that that one has got always on top on it. And that way the Task Manager doesn't disappear behind the PowerPoint. I'm trying to run both a demo version of Task Manager and PowerPoint at the same time here. So that's the basic Task Manager, but I very rarely use it. What I tend to use is the more standard Task Manager. In order to get to that, I simply press the More Details button at the bottom there. See the bottom left, there's a More Details button. And if you press that, you get this. And this gives you the current status, everything that you're doing, plus half a dozen other tabs, which we'll talk about as I go through the next 5 minutes. And then some details. Now, what I'm going to do again is bring over this one, more details, up it comes. And we're now looking at an actual live running Task Manager. If I click in the top of any column, it'll sort things in order of that. So I'm particularly interested in where's all my memory going. I click on there, and it turns out the desktop window manager is what's eating the most memory in this PC. And then the Task Manager program, and PowerPoint's not using very much. And for some reason, service, localhost, I don't know what that is, but I'll show you how to find out in a minute. And the anti-malware service executable is running at the minute to stop me opening anything that'll give me a dirty nose. But I don't particularly need that. If I sort them by name, I can go to that anti-malware service executable and stop it or delete it if I need to. If I want to go beyond the standard Task Manager, then at the bottom of this page, there's something called Resource Monitor. And what I'm going to do, move Task Manager out the road. And there's what Resource Monitor looks like. It's a much more detailed view of what's going on in the processor, what's going on with the memory, what's going on with the disks and the network and the whole lot. You generally don't need that. If you're a programmer or an OS, you're wondering about OS leaks and stuff, then yeah, you're in there. But for day-to-day running of your PC, you really don't need to go to the Resource Manager very often. You can do practically everything that you want to do in Task Manager. So let's kill a rogue program. I will, for just a second, I will minimize my PowerPoint out the road. I have a magical thing, which I'm going to open up. And I'm going to open up Task Manager at the same time. Now, that thing there, I can delete. The simple thing to do is point to it here, right mouse, and I can end that task. Or I can look at how much memory, disk, network it's taken, or I can do all these other things. Where's that file? What's causing that? See that window there? What's causing that to happen? Where's the file for that? What can I find out about that online? I can do all sorts of good stuff about that. For the time being, all I'm going to do is kill it, and it's away. Simple as that. Now, if I open it again, I could have killed it just as easily by pressing that and getting rid of it. So there's no gain in that. However, I'm going to open it a third time. And what I'm going to do this time is I've got a dodgy timer that was really badly written by myself, right? If I put in 5 seconds there and start it, it'll count down and finish. Not a problem. If I put 1,000,000 in there, it'll do exactly the same thing. Did you know that 1,000,000 seconds is 11 days, 13 hours? 11 and a half days is 1,000,000 seconds. Anyway, at this point, because this is so shittily written, I've lost control of it. In Task Manager, it tells me that that's not responding, that that's the process that's hung up. But it doesn't stop me from killing it. So when you get a process that you lose control of into Task Manager, you can zap it, you can get shot of it. Equally well, these things down here, that's the programs, the apps, and then there's the background processes, which are things that are running in the background. And then beyond that, there are things that Windows is doing. I'm going to pull this down. And there's the Windows processes. Right, now, let's have a wee look. Let's have a look at these background apps, see if there's any of those that I need or don't need. My phone. I don't have my phone connected to the PC. Never have. I've got no idea why that's there. So I can right mouse it and get a shot of it. And it's away. My machine's still running. Nobody has died. And I can do that to get rid of things that I really don't care about. Right? If I don't have a database running in my PC and there's all these database processes, I can kill them. Now, at this point, all I need to do to unkill them is restart the PC, and the PC will start the same way as it did before. So let's get back to the PowerPoint. Let's park the Task Manager out the road for a minute. So I've killed a rogue process. I can kill an unwanted process like I just did with my phone. I can stop a process as well. I'll show you how to do that later on. That lives in another part of the Task Manager. Monitoring usage. Now, if I just go back over here and go back to performance, there's how much memory I'm using. There's how much CPU is getting currently committed to what's going on. If my machine has more than one processor, I can right mouse there and tell it to show me logical processors. And there's the two logical processors and how much work each of them's doing. That was the right mouse. If I now go back to that stupid little program that I made, I'm about to open it. You see the processor takes a little bit of a hit. But if I tell it to do that daft count again, (1,000) and start, I'm watching the processor. And you can see that from when I press the button, the processor has been up to 60% utilization. And now it's spending 60% of its time, well, 43%, 45%, spending most of its time on that daft process, very high power usage, not using an awful lot of memory, but it's killing my machine. And for that reason, I'm going to kill it yet again. And as I kill it, we can watch the processor load, come back down again, so that I know what it is that's doing the hard work in killing the machine's performance. You can also watch the amount of memory being used. Speaking of memory, what I'm going to do now is open up Firefox. Come on, Firefox. Look what it's done to the CPU trying to open Firefox. Both processors flat out. And once it eventually gets open, I'm going to open some tabs. And if you watch, the Ethernet's flat out. Look at the way the memory load has increased. Right, disk's not doing anything particular. But there's the network. There's the CPU as it tries to load these. As it tries to load these images. Look at the memory, up and up and up and up. And that's because if I go back here and look at Firefox, it opens a window. It opens for every window, every tab that's open. I get a separate Firefox process. And they each have a CPU load and they each have a memory load. So by opening lots and lots and lots of Firefox tabs, I'm putting lots and lots of load on there. Back to my performance graph, and I'm going to kill Firefox. Close all the tabs. The load in the CPU takes a dive to practically nothing. The load in the memory takes a dive to practically nothing. The network goes to practically nothing. Firefox is a resource-hungry thing, right? And you'll find if you use Opera, for example, it's not just so resource-hungry. Microsoft's own is somewhere between the two, and you can actually monitor what you're doing. Because I'm doing this in a virtual machine, it's a small machine, it's only got 2 gig of RAM, and it's easy to see these things. Whereas if you've got a big, powerful machine, it's not maybe just so easy to see these things. Here's an interesting one. I'm going to plug in a thumb drive. And as soon as I plug in a thumb drive, the anti-malware executable kicks in. Yes, connect it to the virtual machine. And as it kicks in, look at the memory going up as the anti-malware goes in and starts checking this. There's the CPU. There's the bump as it loads it. And while I've got that thumb drive in there, the anti-malware is looking at everything that's on it, and I can see what's going on. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but another drive appeared there. See it? That's the second drive coming in. And when I pull the thumb drive back out, the second drive disappears. And what will happen is that the memory, I will get it back, but it'll take a minute or two for it to very gently leak back out as the memory handles get reclaimed and the garbage collection goes on and the memory gets taken back into the fold. So going back to my PowerPoint and minimizing the task manager out the road. Memory leaks and hogs, I've already explained that with Firefox. A memory leak is when a program, that little thing that I wrote there, the thing with the timer on it, has also got a memory leak page, but I don't like to use it because it crashes things. Sometimes you write a program that opens something and adds something to the memory. And then every time you open it, adds more to the memory, adds more to the memory that's taken up, but it doesn't ever delete anything. And the memory gets fuller and fuller and fuller. And the amount of memory that your program is using gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's called a memory leak because you're effectively leaking memory out of that program to the place where you've got no memory left. And again, you can find that by using those monitor panels. The next one is app history. And I put this up because this I find fascinating. I don't have my phone connected to my machine, but it's used more CPU time on this machine than anything else. I don't have Microsoft Photos either, or Microsoft Office, or movies and TV, or an Xbox, or have I ever used Microsoft Store. I've never used PowerShell in this machine. I use PowerShell in other machines, but not in this one, all the way down. None of these are programs I have ever used, but they've all got more CPU time than any of the programs that I have used. So really, if you've got a new machine, one of the things you might want to do is go in here, find these boys and kill them. And I'm about to show you how to do that. I'm going to go back to my live task manager rather than the one that I took pictures of. There it is there. There's the app history. There we go. There's the things that I've actually used this. Again, I've never used my phone or Microsoft's. This is a virtual machine that I only ever use for these things on Sundays. I've never used it for anything else. So none of these things should ever have been used. Microsoft Solitaire, never been on. Never opened a game on a computer. Back to startup. Cortana. When I switch the machine on, this is what gets automatically started by Windows coming in. At the top right-hand corner, it tells me that the last time I booted this machine, it took 0 seconds in the BIOS. Now, what that means is that when I last booted it, it was a restart rather than a start. If you start the machine from cold, switch it on at the power, then that'll say 5.6 seconds or 8.2 seconds or something. And that's how long the time was between you pressing the button and it getting into Windows when it was actually inside the BIOS. But if it just reboots Windows, then that becomes 0 seconds. But it's automatically loaded all of these. Skype, I don't have Skype on this, so I've disabled it. Cortana, I've disabled as well. Microsoft OneDrive, I don't use on this. I shouldn't be using it. So if I right mouse it, I can disable it. Or if I wanted to, I could right mouse, open the file location and go and delete it if I needed to. There's where the OneDrive is, and I can go and zap that if I have to. I don't particularly have to. The next thing along are the users. Now, there's only one user in this machine. If somebody else was logged into this machine, he or she would appear there. As I said earlier, it's most likely to be somebody else wanting to use my printer, or somebody else wanting to use my internet connection or a network resource or a shared drive, something like that. They would all turn up there and I can see what I'm up to. And then details. This is the details of all the things that we're doing. And again, the same rules apply here. Every time you start a process of any kind, any program of any shape or form in Windows, it gets two things. It gets something called a handle and it gets something called a process ID. And the first thing that gets started, the kernel of the processor, is process ID 0 and then process ID 1. So the things that are recent have got recent process IDs. Now there's the process IDs in that order, and there they are in that order. Now that service host, if I click on it, right mouse, I can kill that if I want to. I can analyze the chain, see what it's doing, right? A service host is a little routine that runs certain services for the PC. I can go and look at the services that's being run by that service host. And here they are. It's a local service network restricted for the security center. So I'm not going to touch that. However, if I go to the service hosts and sort them by name, there's 24 of the buggers. That one there's got my name on it. That's being run by me. So right mouse that, go to the services. That's my clipboard. Right. So that service is there because at some point I've had the clipboard open. And if I wasn't using the clipboard, I could get shot of that. There's another one with my name on it. What services is it? The Unistack SVC group. I've got no idea what that is. I think I'm a wee bit scared of that. How's it described as? The Connected Devices Platform Service User 37E. That is a service for my pen drive that I had plugged in a wee while ago. It's keeping that running in case I need to plug that pen drive back in. So again, I can right mouse that or just simply stop it here. Remember I said you can stop a process. So if I go in here, I can stop that process. It becomes stopping and then it becomes stopped. So at that point, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint because there's one other item I want to talk about, and that's Google Drive Sync. Somebody was asking me, Neil was asking me this week about clever uses of backup. And I use Google Drive for this. Google, if you've got a Gmail account, then you've got Google Drive. Google will give you 10 gigabytes of space on their servers for nothing. It's a good deal. And what happens is you save something to a directory in your machine and it automatically gets uploaded to Google Drive. And then any other machine that you've got, you open your Gmail on or you open your Google Drive on, a copy of it appears there. So the same files that I save on the G Drive, I can open again on my grandpa box here, on my laptop, on my tablet, on my phone, anywhere I can open all the same files. I can even, if I'm down at Davies, open up his web browser, download something from G Drive and shut his web browser just by logging in and logging out of Google Drive. It's really useful for a backup and it's on the cloud. It belongs to Google. They're worried about backing it up, not me. So much so that I pay Google, I think it's $10 a year or £7.50 for an extra 100 gigabytes of it. So I've got 110 gigabytes of backups with all my 3D prints and all my programming stuff and all my files and all my documents. And I can get them from anywhere on the planet. And it's a really interesting backup technique. However, when you switch the machine on, the first thing that Google Drive does is it analyzes your G Drive folder to make sure it's up to date. And if it's not, or even if it is, it synchronizes it with the cloud. So when you switch the machine on, this G Drive Sync or Google Drive Sync uses an awful lot of processor, an awful lot of memory, and all of your internet bandwidth to connect back to Google and make sure that you haven't changed anything that Google hasn't heard about. So for that reason, if I've got no interest, I'm working on a file, I'm working on a 3D print of the month for somebody, then what I'll do is I'll open the machine up and I'll immediately come in here and kill the Google Drive Sync. I don't need Google Drive eating all my lunch, having all the processor cycles, eating all the memory and using my bandwidth. I'm going to use that for something else. So in answer to what Neil was saying earlier, Google Drive's a great solution, but you have to be careful with it, particularly when you switch a machine on. But then the thing here is that you can disable it and then come back in later on and enable it again when you're doing nothing. I come in, I do an hour writing code or writing 3D print of the month or whatever. I'm then going through for a coffee and a kick at the dog. So at that point, I can simply put that back to enabled so that Google Drive does its things while I'm drinking coffee and kicking the dog sort of thing. Yep. Details and services, I kind of went through that. I explained some of the stuff that was on that. Right, comfort and joy. First of all, if you change something in the startup, then that will persist so that you can stop things from starting up and then go and restart your machine and see the difference you've made. And the startup things will change. Well, the general processes and apps, those all just restart when the machine restarts. But anything that you change in either startup or service will stay changed. If you disable it or switch it off or stop it, then they'll stay that way. So you've got to be careful with those boys, right? And that said, you're not going to do anything permanent in the way of damage, right? You can always go back in and fix what you've changed. But for that reason, I recommend that you only ever change one thing at a time. However, to save that from biting you in the bum, I've got a couple of tricks that you should know about. The restore point trick and the reg edit trick. The restore point trick. If you go to the search bar, bottom left, and type restore, you will get offered create a restore point. And if you select that, it will bring up this dialog. And at the bottom there, there's a create button, and you create a restore point. It just gives you a single box saying what you want to call it, and it adds the date and time. So I can call it before I installed GMRI, or so before GMRI, and it'll say before GMRI, Sunday the 9th of May 2021, and it'll save that. And then 2 days from now, when it's all went terribly wrong because Java hadn't installed and it trying to take Java out, I accidentally deleted some system files and now it won't boot, and oh God, and I've had to use safe mode to get back in, and God, I hate this bloody computer. I just go up there and press System Restore and select the option for the before I put GMRI in, and that takes my computer back to where it was before I started with all that GMRI nonsense. All the same programs are installed, all the same settings, all the same services, all the same everything. And I'm exactly back to where I wanted to be. So that if I'm faffing with anything, if I'm faffing with the registry editor, if I'm faffing with the task manager, it's a good point to just take a snapshot of where you were before you started, and then you can restore the snapshot once you're finished or once you've run into the mud. And then there's the registry editor trick. Now, the registry editor is a big, hairy beast with teeth. It can kill your machine dead in the water. Don't touch the registry editor unless you're really comfortable with what you're doing. Here's how to attack the registry editor. If you go to the search bar at the bottom and just type the word reg, you'll be offered the registry editor. If you open it, I'm going to go to the next thing and come back, the next slide. If you select computer there, right, the registry is all the settings for all the software, for all the hardware, for all the processor, everything internal. It's everything, all the settings for your computer. If you select computer, which means everything, and then export it, it'll take all the important settings and put them in a file. If you call the file whole registry and save it on your desktop, then you've got a file on the registry. And if I go back to the previous one, just near the export option, there's an import button. So that if I've made a complete horse's patoot of it, I can go back in here and tell it to import the registry again, and it'll put everything back to where it was. Actually, people pass registry changes to each other by simply putting these reg files together. And all you need to do is double click a reg file and it'll apply that to the registry. So if you've made a whole registry file and you double click it, it'll put the registry back to the way it was. So that way you can save everything by importing and exporting the registry. I suggest if we're going to talk about inside the registry editor, that's one for another day. Meanwhile, I think I've given you about enough. Rules to live your life by. Know what you're doing, or at least know what you think you're doing and why you think you're doing it. Only make one change at a time and test the change. Make sure that it does what you think it's doing before you carry on. If you start making changes and you get changes that are crossed over, you're going to make mistakes and it's all going to turn to soup. And I personally, while I'm working, I always keep a reporter's notepad on my desk and I just scribble down what I think I'm doing, because you get into this rabbit hole whereby you start doing one thing. In order to do that, you have to install something else. In order to get the installer to work, you have to go and change something. And once you've changed something, you notice that you haven't changed something else. And suddenly you're five steps down the rabbit hole and you've got no idea why you get out of your bed this morning. So you have to make sure you keep a wee note so that you know what you're up to. And I think I've punished you guys enough for a Sunday afternoon. Any questions?